Let's talk about trauma. So many of us have been impacted by trauma, whether from our early childhood years or in our adult years or chronic stress. Our society is inundated with the effects of trauma and chronic stress. We know that more than half of the people in our society have been affected by trauma. And I think over the last 3 years, if we were to redo that study, which was done, almost 10 years ago, that we would find that that number has really skyrocketed. Now, what are the effects of trauma on our body? Well, here's what happens. Trauma and the events or perception of trauma, I'm not here to tell you what qualifies as a traumatic event, because it's really our perception of that trauma, our reaction to that trauma that causes that biological change in the body. What we see is an increase in inflammation across the board. We see an increase in intestinal permeability, and we see immune dysfunction that happens as well from trauma. And all three of these things can persist for a lifetime if not addressed. Now, what's happening with inflammation? There's a decrease from our T regulatory cells. In our immune system, we have many different branches that are communicating throughout the body and keeping things running, right? And so our T cells are one of those, and our T regulatory cells are a branch of our T cells that go around the body and put out inflammatory fires, whether that's autoimmune reactions or from infection. They are the ones that go out and put those fires out. They quell that inflammation. And what we see with traumatic events or perceptions of trauma is that we have a decrease in those T regulatory cells, so that our body is not putting out that inflammation and our inflammatory state rises. We see that this can cause an increase in our intestinal permeability, meaning, in common speak, leaky gut. So the cells of our GI tract, of our gastrointestinal tract, are held together by tight junctions. These tight junctions, if we look at them under a microscope, they look like a zipper. And intestinal permeability refers to not the zipper being unzipped in this big hole, but microscopic holes. It looks like the zipper is being pulled apart, and there's teeny little holes for things to permeate from the inside of the GI tract into the bloodstream of the gastrointestinal tract. And we know that once things get in the bloodstream, they go systemic throughout our body. This is how some autoimmune reactions start to happen as those things travel to lymph nodes and incite this communication, this conversation with our immune system. We see dysregulation in our immune system. We see a dysregulation in our mitochondrial function as well. And like I said earlier, all of these things can persist for a lifetime. So how does quantum biology look at these impacts of trauma and how to heal from them? It looks at this invisible blueprint, this invisible intelligence that pervades life on this planet, in this universe, and certainly in our body. There is a conversation of frequency, electricity, voltage, of the flow of electrons and protons, and how that impacts not only our perception of trauma, not only our effects from a traumatic event, but our ability to heal from it as well. So it's this beautiful tapestry of looking at it from a perspective that's not chemical and mechanical in nature. We know that that chemical model that we have used to treat anxiety and depression is not at all the model that is working for everyone, right? The research just came out a couple of years ago that that model does not encompass the whole picture. And I believe that's because there is this sea of quantum communication happening, from the light in our environment to the sound in our environment to the frequency of voltage, of the flow of electrons, of protons throughout the body. And addressing trauma from this level, we start to see much different results. So stay tuned for part 2, where we talk about some of these results. Again, if you like this content, please subscribe, please give me a like, and give me a comment down below letting me know what you think. Thank you so much for joining me.